Good morning. Hello. Welcome to Cut the Shit, Cue the Genius, webisode 13. I get a thrill just like we're in double digits. It's like being close to teenage age, I guess. Hope everyone's keeping cool. Beaming here from Boston, Mass, and it's probably going to hit more than 100 degrees. So let us know what the temperature is where you're beaming from. And I am joined with Michelle Bruno, Liz Caruso, and we are here this wonderful Thursday to talk about a very relevant topic. We're seeing it more and more now, post-Corona coaster, and it is about how your employees that are leaving your companies, your organizations, it's become a revolving door for some, where the employees on their way out are actually taking the company IP with them. So we're going to talk about different scenarios. If you are feeling this, or if you have witnessed this, or you have been a part of this, yes, you can stay anonymous if you want, but we would love for you to be the genius, to be part of this conversation. And speaking of geniuses, we are always looking for geniuses to be lifelines for us. So please visit us at dahliaplus.com/cue the genius and let us know if you want to be a lifeline with us. So good morning, ladies. How are you?
Good morning, Dahlia.
Cool. I feel like Charlie's Angels.
I like that.
Me too. We do have hidden ammunition and talents. Good morning, Karen from New York. Heat advisory until Friday. Well, actually, this webisode might actually create its own heat advisory for a lot of companies. So let's start. Let's talk about company IP, or information that truly needs to stay with the company. Liz, can you help us define that? What do you think the definition is for IP? Because it can be
Yeah, I think it's hard. And I remember my last corporate job was like over 10 years ago. But I was working in an organization, and that was like right when I think this personal branding really started taking off, where people started feeling like, hey, I'm bringing a lot to this. I remember having a Twitter account and all this stuff, and people were like, well, I don't know if you're allowed to do that. And there were a lot of discussions about the rules. But I think at the end of the day, anything that is earned on company time or is provided by company resources. For example, I know for a lot of salespeople, for example, LinkedIn, you might be able to build a huge LinkedIn connection using your company's upgraded LinkedIn account. To me, those contacts, even though they are, that's where it gets really muddy. Like, I think it's both. You need to make sure that those contacts stay with the company, have, transition to new people within the company that could, take over those relationships. But you can't separate out that if I'm the one who is talking to these people and I go somewhere else, I'm still going to talk to them. There's a personal side to all of this. So I could see why this topic is going to get hot, because it's really complicated.
Yeah.
Really complicated. And I see from both sides as a business owner now, and having team members who are working on client events, even with partnerships. We talk so much now about like partnering. We work with a lot of other planners. And then we have had this scenario where someone comes to us directly. You're like, well, we got you through this other person, so we're going to have to reroute you back there. And that's, so I don't know. It's a pretty complicated, as usual. You ask a complicated question, then you're like, Liz, what do you think?
We wouldn't be here to cut the shit if it wasn't complicated conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
So we truly want it so that we're moving the needle. I think companies need to reassess their contracting terms in regards to IP. Not only the non-compete, because honestly, at this point, they should just nix that one, but also, what is the plan that you put in place just in case your employees leave, which is a huge possibility now, more than it was before. Bruno, what do you think? How should companies go about this, or what's a specific scenario that you're seeing more of now?
So I think companies are going to be screwed going forward. I really don't know how they're going to be able to sort of protect whatever it is that they deem to be their IP, because there's just lots of examples and a body of thought, especially with younger individuals coming into the workforce, that, you know, employees now think that they have this sort of personal IP autonomy, and whatever they, the person that they enter the company with is not the person that they leave as. So they've obviously grown and have more information and more tools that might not lie within the confines of the company. Like Liz said, your LinkedIn profile, for example, your Twitter following, all of those things. And there's a number of things that are happening too outside of that in the real world. The idea that a lot of people feel like they are creators, and say creators create a body of work within the structure of a company, but then they leave and they want to take that with them, as if someone, for example, made, art and put it on Instagram, and then Instagram says, we find this offensive or whatever, and then takes away your whole profile and you're done. And all this IP that you've accumulated is now gone. Even in the metaverse, there's a principle of self-sovereignty, the idea that you go from world to world carrying your identity and your information. Well, what if that expanded to, the notion of personal IP, and you're going around and this is something that you own, and no matter what world you go into, you still own it. So I think it's going to be really difficult going forward for companies to think about what do they truly own, and how they can prepare for companies who will inevitably leave. Nobody's there for more than a couple of years now. It's just really rare. So
Yeah.
it's hard. So
Well,
I don't think we have an answer.
I don't think we collectively have answers. I think we will have ideas. So it will be ideas not only for companies to embrace, but primarily also for the employees or freelancers or consultants, on what terms they need to engage on specific projects. So I have been, contacted by several event profs that are out of work, especially on the sales and the biz dev side, where, they come to me when they've been approached by many companies, especially event tech companies, where they're like, I got a job offer, but they want me to open the Rolodex. And for those that don't know what the Rolodex is, it was that little black thing with those cards that always used to fall out or half out. But, we're talking about like, hey, MJ. So we're talking about them being hired for a very specific IP reason. They think they're going to be hired because they're bringing in connections. So the whole expectation is so much higher. You're coming in, you're going to give us all your contacts. I've actually seen job offers where people on the sales side, they had to, in their agreement, put how many leads or how many connections they were going to do in a specific amount of time. I think that's screwed up. This is like, you're coming in with a huge expectation that is not going to be fulfilled. And it's actually wrong. I think it's wrong where you are trying to almost use someone, in my opinion. But so I think when it comes to, Bruno, what you were saying, especially with the younger generation, they are going to be almost moving their information with them wherever they go. And on the company side, HR, as well as the leadership team, you have to rethink how you're contracting. You have to rethink what's in an agreement and really, really define or redefine what kind of IP is going to step out the door when that person leaves, or is going to stay with the company. And what are the processes of that data planning or that data management, if you will, within the company? And Liz, you're all about data and processes. So this is your arena. When we talk about succession, not from a sales perspective, but from operations, because that's a big bulk of the IP, right, on the client side. Give 3 examples of what companies can do right now, and then that they can write within the contracts, basically.
Oh God, I don't know. This is complicated.
I was thinking of one thing. I don't know if this could be written into a contract, but perhaps someone in the organization needs to take charge of this exact thing that's happening. So
Cool.
we have, a chief HR person. Maybe there's sort of a chief IP officer or something like that, where they are in charge of sort of rethinking this relationship with employees and safeguarding and defining what's mine and what's yours, and having more of I know this is so idealistic, but having more of a collaborative relationship. I think about what we talked about a couple of webisodes ago about, when you have to let people go, treat them as spores that are out, populating other companies. What if you maintain sort of a more of a collaborative relationship? So if they go on to build on the IP that they've created with you, can you leverage that in some way? Can you participate in that in some way? I don't know what that means, but that would be sort of one thing, changing the relationship that you have with employees. Another thing would be creating this sort of chief IP officer that can be a guardian over these relationships. Okay,
Yep.
I leave the third one for you guys.
So just Jen is still seen as anonymous on LinkedIn, but I think because she is the most engaged in all our webisodes, we know when it's Jen. So but Jen, just for you, for your reference, I had asked the question of what can companies put together in regards to managing the IP or data, or like the information, especially for operations or accounts, so that it does not leave the building, no pun intended. But so if you have any ideas, because I know that you do, then please share in the comments, and we will share them with everyone here. I think that's a great idea. The whole idea of employment in the, I don't want to say new normal, going for future normal. Let's do that. So the future normal, I think the hiring has to be a collaborative effort, and it has to be very transparent. So whoever's coming on board has to also share what kind of IP they're bringing in that belongs to them. For example, if someone's coming in and they already have like 100,000 followers on social media, and a company thinks they're bringing that in because it's going to be a marketing and sales magnet, and then automatically they're going to get like, community and business from it, it has to be said from the get-go, these are not yours yet, or these are not yours. This is my brand versus the company brand. And if the responsibility is to build the company brand, therefore the followers are then going to be tracked separately. But this is a conversation that has to happen before the signing of any agreement. And I think, people, especially those that are really looking for jobs, they don't see the terms and conditions. They don't question terms and conditions as much as they should. And we did talk about this. The imposter syndrome sets in. So they feel that they're not like worthy, or they're not enough. They don't know their clout. They don't know what they can bring in. But I've seen operations team members that have like kick-ass ways of putting SOPs together, operation management, like processes and workbooks and playbooks. Who's going to own that once they land and they do it for that company? Does it go away with them when they leave? Or is there a version of it that stays with the company?
So Jen Artura is asking, what's the question that I'm answering? So the question is, how do we now think about IP, what the company owns, what the person owns going forward in this? But there's a difference, I think, between institutional knowledge and, I think, employee IP. So I'm just looking at what MJ is saying. Yes, I think that it's legitimate to document processes within a company, to, have those somewhere so that if one person leaves, another person can pick up the ball and run with it. That is a legitimate use of company resources. But to think that someone's going to come in with their list of clients that they've built relationships with over the years and then not leave with those when they go to another competitor it's probably, I don't know. I don't want to say dumb, but it's kind of dumb.
Well, and isn't there like a difference between, like systems and things like that versus people? We don't own people, so these might be my contacts, but they can become your contacts. They can become, maybe even doing a podcast like this with three of us who have our own brands sounds crazy to people, because who's watching this? Are they now our audience, or were they your audience, Dahlia? Or there's been people on the show so far that I've met because of the show, because they watch and they chime in the comments. I'm like, oh, that's a cool person. We should connect. Then what? And I think in that case, when you're talking about people, they quote unquote belong to everyone. Like, you can bring in your list. If it makes it into the company CRM, the company has any interaction with them. They attend an event, they buy a product, they whatever. To me, that becomes a company person also. You can't just like take those people out because you brought them in.
Right.
I don't know. I think that piece is where it's a lot more
dicey,
gray. But like, to Michelle's point, when you were talking about like, I've put all my work on Instagram, and Instagram technically owns it, or they say they do. Yeah. So then they take down my whole account. So I do think there is something there in terms of the work that we're creating. There's a responsibility on us to ensure that we literally own it, that like if Instagram took it down, we don't lose everything. And what that looks like in the company too is like how when you bring in a process into the organization, like the SOPs, you bring that in, you contribute as a company to building that out for the use case that the company's using, then that becomes company property. And then you take that process to the next one and you tailor it. To me, that is a little bit clearer. I don't know.
Well, I would love to talk to some of these influencers, like Jeremiah Aoyang is a prime example. He built up this amazing following on his own. And then he took a job as, I think, CMO of Rally that makes, coins, cyber coins, so whatever you call those. And so he brought his whole community into this job. He's going to, I would think, leave someday. No CMO stays for like, what's the stat? 18 months anywhere. And he will have gained something and then he leaves. So what are the obligations for the employer, Rally, and Jeremiah to, what stays, what goes? Or should employers now treat the employees as rented land? Instead
you're really
of
into this metaverse parcel thing right now. Your penthouse awaits you. I understand completely where you want to land. And yes, Bruno,
I'm just really into shifts in thought.
Well, the metaverse and decentralization, yes, the metaverse and decentralization is shifting that thought tremendously. Yeah. And we've always said, hey HR, hey companies, make sure you understand millennials and the new generation, and you actually truly, if you have to understand how decentralization is going to work. It is going to affect the movement and the ownership of information like nobody's business. Yeah. And this lends itself to company IP. To Liz's point, and Jen as well, when it comes to systems, when it comes to operations, SOPs, that seems to be a little bit more defined. Yes, document everything. MJ said, for the sake of her company, she had to have someone document it for the SOPs, etc., revisit it, reevaluate it, make it transparent so that everybody knows that it is company IP first and foremost. Celebrate those that are putting it together. So that's one. But the other thing to do is have a successor. For every person that you have in your company, you have to have someone who's the external hard drive backup for that person. It's very true. So like you have to, I mean, Liz, you and I, we joke and Bruno, where we're like, we need to clone ourselves. We need to clone our brains. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But, you know, you need at least someone who can be a successor in certain aspects. But I will say, when it comes to sales and marketing and brands, and this is something that we do with our LinkedIn corners, every time we go to a show, like I was at the veterinary medicine show, all the company LinkedIn, all the profiles, the personal profiles had promotion of the company they're with. I'm like, no, honey, you are your own brand. These followers and these connections are yours. You promote you, not the company. So to Liz's point, you know, on social media, on relationships, it is about you as a brand, not the company. So that becomes dicey though. That's the gray area that I don't know. You know, I would never put in a company CRM all my connections. Never.
But I think it is, I would never either. And I don't think that anyone should do that. I think, you know, over time though, they do seep in because you start reaching out to your contacts. So from a contact standpoint, I kind of get that. I had that when I started building Liz King events, and then Columbia University was looking at me like, what the hell are you doing over there with that Twitter account? And I was doing my own little thing. And in my case,
it wasn't little, honey.
Completely, at that time it was.
No, it wasn't.
It was completely non-competitive. We were doing events for students. There was no target market. We weren't selling to anybody. And the events I was doing were like totally different, completely different audience, completely outside of the university world. But there was still a lot of like, what is she doing over there? Is she allowed to do that? And there were a lot of discussions with like, what are you doing with those 20,000 followers on Twitter? And I very much saw it the way you're saying it. Like, that's what I do on my time. And those are my connections. And in this case, there was an overlap. It wasn't like sales where like those relationships were coming over. But even then, companies, you know, that's an evolution. I don't know if maybe that's changed in the last 10 years. I have a very hard time believing that it has, that companies are finally like, yeah, you can be your own little thing within our organization. I mean, how do you build a company on the other side? How do you build a company when like everyone sees themselves as their own little islands? They get to do what they want. Those are their relationships. And when they leave, they take everything with them. How are you supposed to build a company like that? You know, I see it on that side too.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with personal relationships that you have with employees. And this is something that transcends the corporate structure.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, you want to nurture people, cultivate something special, and know that they're going to leave, but maybe that's okay. For the time they're there, they're performing, you're getting something out of it, they're getting something out of it, and it's a beautiful thing. Sorry, Dahlia, to interrupt you.
No, don't apologize. I mean, this it is an important conversation. It is very critical for especially those that are trying to find a new adventure, you know, and to define what they can bring to the table. As we say, what can you bring to the table? What can you do for us? But it also has to be transparent. There has to be, you know, guidelines as well as parameters. I come in with 20,000 LinkedIn connections does not mean I hand them over. No. We can work together in order to see how I can, you know, build the brand followers, because it is for the sake of the brand. If I leave with my followers, that's fake marketing, you know, and it's also, it can't be laziness on the company side, meaning the company truly has to integrate these spores or these influencers or brands on how it can sort of push the company brand, the company sales and marketing, as well as the content. And maybe influencer marketing is taking a shift. You know, it's in regards to those that are being hired by companies saying, be an influencer for me for a piece of like content or for our marketing or bring us sales. Hey, we'll give you referral fees. I just got one of those calls yesterday where they're like, we think you're awesome. I'm like, well, I thank you. I do too. I think I'm awesome. And they're like, well, we're the best virtual company ever. I'm like, I'm sure you are. Never heard of you, but yeah, you probably are. And they're like, so we want to hire you as an influencer. I'm like, that's great. Here's my fee. No, we're talking referral fees. You take a percentage and this. I'm like, you can't have that kind of conversation, like, on a long term. So you have to, from a company perspective, if you're dealing with sales and marketing, especially those that are in startup mode, or they think they can cast a wide net of like, I'm going to bring all these entrepreneurial, amazing influencers that have connections. They're going to like pump up that sales funnel, like watch it happen. But what's in it for them and what's in it for you, that has to be super transparent, and it's not free. The whole idea of, you come in, you do this for me, you get 50%, that's bullshit. It's not, it's the same as, hey, why don't you speak for free for me and you're going to get leads. We're not doing that anymore. So that's something that the companies have to really think about. And I like Bruno's idea of, it's co-creating the agreement as well as what's the succession plan. Yes, MJ, we speak for you as well because we're all in this together. No,
yeah. You're getting some amens here. Amen.
So there's a lot of amens here, but it is on the companies to really reconfigure their agreements and the way they reach out to these experts that they want to have part of their company. So we talked about like a lot of things, but one is having succession plans and having someone who documents the operations side, SOPs, the account management side. The clients are suffering right now, especially with partners, because you turn around and like you wake up in the morning and you got a new account manager from like a tech company or something, and you're like, holy shit, who the hell is that? And they start over. It's like, hey, how are you? Where do you live? Like, no, you don't want that. So I'm going to say that's the easy part, companies. But have a successor, have an external hard drive for your MJs, your Jens, your Liz, your Brunos, etc. So when those amazing people leave, the intel is there, and it's accessible. Don't put it behind gateways and shit just because you think someone's going to take it and run and go to the competitor. That's a different story. But then when you're talking relationships, that's what you need to discuss. I mean, that is a give and take now. I know I'm not giving my Rolodex to anyone, so.
That's your superpower. Yeah, I mean,
There you go.
Right. I think we have to treat these relationships now as very temporal, very temporary.
Yes.
While we're together, I would love to leverage you in this way. It sounds harsh. And you tell me how you'd love to leverage my infrastructure, my organization, my process. And let's, while we're together, figure out how we can make the most of this relationship. But it's understood you will probably move on, and so will we. And so it's all about now.
Yeah.
That's why I'm never going to be a boss again, because I would not want to hire like our kids, who is the future generation, because they're going to be calling the shots, and I do not want that. So I feel for you, people with companies. MJ, I feel for you. I really do.
Yeah, I feel for everybody right now. I mean, I feel for those that are trying to get new adventures. I feel for those that are trying to run businesses. I fear for the clients. It's a minefield right now. I mean, it is very, very rocky. My prediction, and it's funny because when Corona Coaster happened, March 5th, I remember when industry, companies or media publications came to me and they're like, oh, so what's your prediction on when we will go face to face? And I'm like, 2022. And they're like, that's fucking bullshit. Excuse my language, but we can't print you. You are a Debbie Downer, and that is not realistic. Well, guess what? So my prediction, the Dalai Lama says that, the next couple of years until probably 2025 is going to be more of a roller coaster than what we've been through. But you can exploit the chaos and you can actually take full advantage of it to get your shit together inside out, like with new talent. But you have to be transparent and you have to be patient and you have to be transparent enough to have these conversations with your clients. So you might have Bruno as an account manager today, but then it's going to be Liz, or it's Bruno and Liz. Just in case Bruno leaves, Liz can come on and it will be fine. So you never have conversations like that with your clients because you're afraid. So
way to cut the shit, Dahlia.
Yeah, way to cut.
We have to end. We can't continue this conversation.
All right. So any last thoughts for... Come on, Bruno.
It's like, be careful out there. It's like, yeah, take your depression or your blood pressure meds regularly, get good exercise, eat well. I just heard a stat on eating processed foods. Like if you eat 2 cookies a day, you've killed like 4 billion brain cells. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I just have the thoughts. I'm glad we're here together going through it.
Liz, what about you?
I just want to remind us all, as I'm reminding myself in the midst of this craziness, to keep the humanity and the collaboration, because there's a lot of what we're talking about is a lot of like, I own this and I'm in this for myself, and on both sides, the companies and the people. And I've said this before, I would love to see our society be more collaborative, be more about helping each other. That's my idealistic world. And so I just feel like as we navigate, I completely agree. We're going into rough waters for sure. As we navigate that, keeping your mental health in mind, but also the mental health of those around you, relationships that you have, that these are humans we're talking about. These are people. They're not just followers or fans. They're people. And yeah, I'm sure that's super idealistic. And in 3 years, I'm going to be looking back like, oh my God, look how much nicer our world was back then.
I agree with both of you. And I also think that, empathy, compassion, transparency is going to help you exploit the chaos that you're in and actually build companies that are much stronger than you think. So, so on that note, we are looking forward to getting new topics from everybody. So if you can go to dahliaplus.com, cue the genius. If you want to check out past episodes, please do comment, share. Please share the love. Bring in a friend, a peer, tell them about the show and how we do cut the shit. As well as tell us any topics you want, or if you want to be a lifeline, we would love to have you. And thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you next week at 9:30 with whatever drink of choice you want. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.